You didn't start out feeling broken. That feeling was planted, slowly, deliberately, and with purpose. The narcissist didn't just hurt you by accident. They needed you to question yourself so you'd be easier to control. Every time you stood up for yourself, they made you feel too sensitive. Every time you had a need, they made you feel needy. And when you started to pull away, they twisted the narrative until you questioned your own reality. That wasn't love. That was manipulation disguised as care. The truth is, they couldn't handle your strength, so they chipped away at it piece by piece until you forgot it was ever there. They wanted you to stay, but only as a version of yourself that was quiet, unsure, and easy to bend. But deep down, something in you knew you were never broken. You were being broken down, so you wouldn't walk away. You were conditioned to blame yourself for everything that went wrong. You didn't realize it at first, how often you started saying, maybe it was my fault. Every disagreement somehow became your mistake. If they were distant, it was because you were too emotional. If they exploded, it was because you pushed them too far. Over time, you were trained to internalize their behavior as a reflection of your worth. This wasn't just gaslighting, it was psychological conditioning. The narcissist needed you to believe that you were the problem because the moment you started questioning them, their control would crack. So they flipped the script every time, turning your hurt into guilt. You started apologizing for things you didn't do, shrinking your truth just to keep the peace. It wasn't that you lacked clarity, it's that they worked relentlessly to replace your truth with their version of it. And once that pattern took root, you stopped trusting your instincts. But none of it was your fault. They just made sure you'd believe it was. They attacked your confidence so you'd feel too weak to walk away. It didn't start with obvious insults. It was subtle at first. Backhanded compliments, little jokes about your choices, quiet comparisons to other people. They'd tell you they were just being honest, or that you were too sensitive, while slowly eroding your self-worth. And because it wasn't screaming or name-calling, you questioned yourself instead of them. But make no mistake, it was intentional. The narcissist knew exactly what they were doing. They needed you insecure, unsure, and second-guessing every move, because confident people don't tolerate mistreatment. So they chipped away at the parts of you that used to feel strong. They wanted you to rely on their approval, because that gave them control. And by the time you realized how much you'd lost, you felt too small to leave. But that feeling, it was planted, on purpose. You were never weak. You were made to feel that way so they could keep you exactly where they wanted you. Every moment of kindness was followed by emotional punishment. You held on to the good moments like lifelines, the sweet words, the rare affection, the times they seemed to truly care. Those moments kept you hoping. But the truth is, every bit of kindness came with a cost. Right after the warmth, there was always a cold withdrawal. After the apology came silence. After a moment of closeness came the emotional distance, the blame, the guilt, the tripping. It was never consistent, and that's what kept you trapped. You learnt to associate love with instability, to crave affection even when it was followed by pain. This is how the narcissist kept control. They gave just enough to keep you attached, and then punished you for needing more. You weren't being loved, you were being trained to accept crumbs, trained to expect emotional punishment as the price for intimacy. And the longer it went on, the more confused you became, not because you couldn't see the pattern, but because you hoped this time would be different. They used love as a weapon, not a connection. Love in their hands wasn't something safe, it was something sharp, something they used to control, to guilt, to silence. They told you they loved you, but only when it served their needs. Love became a leash, not a bond. When you did what they wanted, they praised you. When you resisted, they withdrew affection like punishment. You weren't allowed to have your own boundaries without being accused of being cold or ungrateful. And over time, you began to fear their version of love. Because it never felt secure, it felt conditional, performative, and tied to your obedience. That wasn't love. That was manipulation, wearing a familiar mask. You were taught to equate approval with love and silence with punishment. But deep down, part of you always knew something was off. Because love shouldn't make you feel afraid to speak. Love shouldn't leave you doubting your worth. They didn't love you. They used your need for love against you. You were taught that your needs were a burden. Anytime you expressed a need, no matter how small, it somehow became too much. You were made to feel demanding, dramatic, or ungrateful. Wanting emotional support, you were too needy. Asking for respect, you were trying to start a fight. Over and over, your basic human needs were twisted into flaws, and eventually you began to believe it. You stopped asking, you stopped expressing, you swallowed your needs to avoid the shame they made you feel. That's exactly what the narcissist wanted. A version of you that didn't ask for anything, that made their life easier, even at the cost of your own peace. You weren't too much. You were made to feel like a burden so they could keep taking without ever giving back. The moment you started to silence yourself was the moment they knew they had power. But your needs were never the problem. The problem was how they convinced you they didn't matter. They needed you to depend on them, so they isolated you. They didn't just want to be close to you. They wanted to be the only one close to you. At first, it looked like love. They wanted more time together, just the two of you. They didn't trust certain friends. They had issues with your family. They made you question people who used to be your support system. Slowly, you pulled away, not because you wanted to, but because keeping the peace felt easier than constant tension. And before you knew it, your world shrank. You had fewer people to talk to, fewer places to feel safe. That was by design. The narcissist needed you to feel like they were your only safe place, even though they were the source of your confusion. When you're isolated, it's harder to leave, harder to even see that something's wrong. But what you mistook as protection was control. They didn't want you to be close, they wanted you to be dependent. They confused chaos with passion to keep you addicted. They made you believe that love was supposed to feel intense, unpredictable, messy, all-consuming. The highs were euphoric and the lows were devastating, but they convinced you that's what real connection feels like. And when things were calm, you felt uneasy, like something was missing. That wasn't passion, that was trauma bonding. Narcissists create chaos because it keeps you emotionally hooked. The emotional roller coaster floods your system with anxiety, relief, and hope, until your nervous system starts to confuse pain with love. You weren't addicted to them, you were addicted to the cycle. The chasing, the apologizing, the moments of closeness that came after the storm. That cycle wires your brain to crave resolution more than peace. And once you're in it, breaking free feels almost impossible. Not because you don't want to, but because it's become familiar. But real love doesn't leave you in survival mode. Real love doesn't thrive on chaos, only control does. The moment you started healing, they tried to reel you back in. The second you started pulling away, really pulling away, they felt it. Not because they cared about your healing, but because they sensed their grip slipping. That's when the sweet messages started coming in again. The apologies, the promises, the odd-changed routine. Suddenly, they remembered your worth, but only when they saw you remembering it too. Narcissists don't panic when you're hurting. They panic when you stop needing them. Your healing threatened the dynamic they built because a whole version of you can't be controlled, so they try to drag you back into the cycle, not with anger, but with bait, and part of you wanted to believe it. Because hope is hard to kill, especially when you gave so much of yourself to someone. But you weren't imagining the shift. The moment you started choosing yourself, their mask slipped. And what they really feared wasn't losing you, it was losing their power over you. If any of this felt familiar, it's because you've lived it and you're not alone anymore. What you went through wasn't love. It was control wrapped in confusion. But the fact that you're here means you're waking up, you're healing. And that healing deserves support, not silence. So if this gave you even a moment of clarity, stay close, subscribe, come back and keep walking forward. Because you're not broken, you're finally breaking free.